Alrighty, so last week we talked about steamrollers. Steamrollers is probably one of the simplest tactics, but perhaps the most difficult because it's the most emotionally charged, right? I'm sure everybody knows what a steamroller is, but just as a quick review, does anybody remember what the three steps were with dealing with a steamroller?
Address it as one of them, huh?
Yeah, the first one is to stop them graciously,
Yeah, right.
like point out that they're interrupting you. A steamroller interrupts constantly.
Right.
2x4 side head.
Yeah, right. Or even just
Conversation's
brandish it.
over
Yeah.
Just brandish
You
it
win.
2x4.
I win.
So, but what do you do? If you stop them? You tell them they keep interrupting you and they just keep doing it. You stopped them. You said it. Yeah.
Shame.
Yeah. So the second one is to shame them by asking in a direct way for courtesy, like, you keep interrupting me. You've asked me a question. Would you like to hear the answer? But let's say they keep steamrolling you even after the first two steps. They keep on steamrolling you. Then what?
Walk away.
You end the conversation.
Yeah. And in a way, that's kind of a form of submission, like Sean was talking about this morning. You give them the last word and then let it go. So you do the Christ-like thing and just let them have the last word and let it go. And maybe you can come back and continue the conversation after they've had a chance to calm down. But it doesn't always have to end with them signing on the dotted line. If they don't want to hear the truth, don't cast your pearls at swine.
Yes, sir.
So this week we're talking about the inside out tactic, and as I was preparing it, it's an interesting one. This one and next week are actually part of the expanded version of the tactics study. So you might notice that the video looks a little bit different, which was why last week kind of ended so abruptly, because I think in the original version he ends it with saying thanks for being with us, whatever. But they just kind of cut it short because there's two more this week and next week. So yeah, let's check it out, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on it afterward.
And that is the key to the inside-out tactic.
Right. So at the beginning I said this was kind of an interesting tactic. Does it sound familiar?
I think it's a specific example of the sibling rivalry.
Mm. Yeah, it seems like less of a tactic and more of a highly developed argument taking the roof off, right?
Yeah, sibling rivalry is more of an appeal to logic.
Mm-hmm.
You said two things that are illogical stated together, while this is an appeal to emotion.
Yeah. Yeah, so he kind of starts with the absurdity of life without God, doesn't he? Because he talks about how there are things about this world, there are things about us, the mannishness of man, that atheism just simply can't explain. And then in using the inside-out tactic, he talks about listening closely and intently to the way people talk, looking for ways in which they, from their own mouths, acknowledge, the truth of reality, of the objective moral value of life, and then how you can use questions to identify that truth and exploit it, right? Which is essentially taking the roof off, but with a view to the absurdity of life without God, the moral argument, and then ultimately with the gospel, making an appeal to Christ. So, did you have a chance to see Guillaume Bignon when you were at EPS in November? He was there. I mean, when he mentioned it in the video, I was like, man, I kind of wish I'd gone to Guillaume's talk, because he was one of the speakers there. But
One thing that he didn't mention that I had a thought on is, there's ways to elicit that from people.
yeah,
Like, asserting an absurd proposition, like, from a nationalistic point of view, postmenopausal women should be eliminated from society.
mm-hmm.
From a reproductive naturalistic standpoint, that makes perfect sense. But no one would advocate absurd.
Right.
I think that,
right.
you know, by
And that's taking the roof
asserting
off.
an absurdity like that, you can elicit what he's talking about, helping to draw that out and helping
Right.
people to see their own inconsistencies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there toward the end, he talked about how this idea of this innate sense of justice and morality is inside of all of us, and how that's kind of the central feature of literature and movies and stories and TV shows. So I was hoping we could reflect on that for a little bit. Like, in what ways have you seen this played out in movies and shows that affirm human significance, even when the person, the storyteller themselves, isn't really going for that, but they just can't help it, you know? Can you think of any good examples of that?
John Eldridge talks about that a lot in his writings, and almost every movie or epic starts out with this nice, picturesque scene of
Shalom.
bliss and happiness and all,
Yeah.
and then something terrible happens, and the redemption of that is in the conclusion, as they struggle through that. That's the storyline in almost every thing that's ever been popular, at least.
Mm-hmm.
In Hannibal?
Popular.
Oh, okay. I was just trying to, throw a wrench in there. There is a silly little movie that I watched called The Peanut Butter Falcon.
I've heard of it. I
The
haven't seen it.
autistic child who was being kept in a home with autistic children, but he felt lost in that place. He just wanted to be a wrestler. And so something happened to where he ran away, and he happened upon a guy that was lost in the world and just trying to find his way. And they got together, and this man listened to the autistic kid, and his dream to become one. He says he wanted to go to Nashville or some city to do this. So the guy helped him get to that place, and everybody else in the world was looking for him. Why he was lost, who took him, where was this kid? And when they finally found him, they decided that, yeah, let's give this kid a chance to do that. And he went and met a popular, wrestler that gave him a chance just to play that part.
Yeah. Yeah.
First, I thought you were talking about Nacho Libre.
No. Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
No, those movies I turn off halfway through. So that was pretty
Napoleon
good.
Dynamite's like the ultimate postmodernist movie.
Which one?
Napoleon Dynamite's about absolutely nothing.
Yeah, but even that has a happy ending. Like, why do we care about Napoleon? Why do we care about Tina or his family, Kip? There's even in that, like, it feels absurd and kind of about nothing, but it still has a happy ending, and there's still love, and it affirms the value of love and happiness. And, yeah. One movie that comes to my mind, because he was talking about Carl Sagan, is Contact. Has anybody seen Contact?
It was on last night.
Yeah. What's interesting about that movie is Carl Sagan's the whole point of it is that there's no God, there's no higher authority governing life, but yet through the use of literary devices, as an author, he basically makes himself God and sort of exposes his own inconsistency in the message that he's trying to send by being God himself through the story. Like, there are these things that are higher than humanity, bigger than the universe, that he can't help but do himself as the author of the story to manipulate the narrative threads to the conclusion that he wants as the author. So it's kind of funny. I'm having a hard time thinking of movies or shows where there is no meaning. It's meaningless, nihilistic.
Like
I can't.
Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, I mean,
I would say that's pretty close, yeah.
I suppose, but
I was wondering where that movie was going the whole time I was watching it.
Yeah.
I've only seen it once, so I don't remember it very well. But there
You
are.
don't bother
You don't
watching
need to see it a
again.
second time, it'll stay in your mind.
Yeah, I didn't really care for it. But I mean, even within the suitcase, there's the suitcase. They open the suitcase and they never show you what's in the suitcase because obviously whatever's in it must be valuable. So even then, you know, there's this
Reaching, but okay.
there's this inescapable. Well, some people have tried to interpret that as like, you know, Marsalis's soul, right? I don't know, but even still, like, no matter how hard they try, there's still some kind of like human condition. You know, like you don't really have a plot arc without some form of
I have
objective
watched
morality.
some movies, I can't recall any specifically,
Hmm.
because they don't stick in the mind. You know, because
Exactly.
There's just useless waste of an hour or two. You know,
Right,
and you're
right.
like, what was the point of this? This
Yeah.
is just, you know, and you just toss
Nobody
it out of
likes
your
them.
mind. You don't need to remember.
Reservoir Dogs now, that kind of movie.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you know, to the point is that because those movies lack the significance point to what we yearn for.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
I've seen the movies. I'm trying to remember.
That's
Right.
right. They
You
don't-
can't remember it. It's so forgettable.
They don't live in the world you live in.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I can remember I watched one of my favorite movies, Braveheart, and I had watched that with my son when he was 13 or 14, and we got done with that, and he says, "Wow, being a man is tough." You know, it just as like it resonating with him, you know, at that time, just like, wow,
Yeah.
there's something significant there.
Right. Right. That struggle. You know, that there's value in that struggle.
Well, I think anybody like that that's willing to go to war, knowing the fact that you could die at any moment, you really have to come to grips with that and say, hey, that's okay. That's a tough thing to live with, and concentrate on what you're doing at the time, that you know something can come out of nowhere and just take you out.
Right. Right. So one last question before we wrap up. Try to think back to conversations you've had with non-believers. Have you seen anybody do this, or like maybe when when you were engaging with the Mormons, have you seen these kinds of unknowingly embracing this mannishness of man? I guess with the Mormons it'd be a little bit different because they don't deny the mannishness of man, but think about a time when maybe you were talking with somebody and they denied the meaning of life. They denied the value of existence, but then their philosophy betrayed them when they talked about injustices, for example.
Right. Anytime injustice is related to the human anything is when they betray that.
Mm-hmm.
2 words, vegan atheist.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Who cares?
Animal rights.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, veganism is a good example because it elevates a moral status for not just humans but animals. And if you're going to elevate the moral status of animals, then what about
What about the
mankind?
original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston?
Yeah.
At the end of that movie, you see the Statue of Liberty just laying down half on a beach.
Mhm.
They finally did it, you son of a... And then these apes are talking like Darwin took the place of God in the next series of life. So that was a weird movie based on some really funky reality.
Yeah, like rights in general. So we were driving home last week from gymnastics, and I saw bumper stickers on this car, and it says your thoughts and prayers are meaningless. And then they had another sticker next to it said housing is a right. And I'm like,
Huh. Interesting.
It's 2 sentences past
Interesting. Yeah.
those thoughts.
There's a lady across the street with her rainbow flag, and in the middle of her picture window facing the street, it says, abortion is healthcare.
Right. Right.
And nobody asked for that to be taken down. That offends the hell out of me every time I open up my window and go, really? It's still up?
It's because it's an offensive thing to anyone who's honest.
Yeah. Rights for some, but not for others.
That's right.
Yeah.
You can't see them. Dang people.
Yeah, it's funny how the ones that are very obnoxious and wrong, immoral.
Yeah.
They push it because they've gotten us to accept it or feel the guilt.
Well, and
And
why
they play
why
on
should you
guilt.
feel guilty?
Huh?
Why should you feel guilty?
That's the point.
Because there's a way things ought to be. It was interesting. I like the way he describes the sweet pain, the primal memory deep in our souls, reminding us of the way the world started, the good, wonderful, whole, and complete. You know, that was really interesting. So that's all I have for this week.
Even I think of, he was talking about Mother Teresa and Diana, but even death itself, we just recognize that as an abomination.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
recognize that that's not right. That it shouldn't end. That there's an eternal something within us
Yeah.
that cries out against that.
And I think that's born from love, and the love cries out for the presence of the other person. And so when someone dies, their presence is no longer there, and so that love is just cut off. And so that's why we mourn when people die, because they've left us and we don't have them anymore.
But love, even that,
Right.
that's not a naturalistic thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, the way that I see this playing out most obvious in my mind is objections to the problem of evil. And I think I've said this before, but I listened to a debate with David Wood about the problem of evil, and the very first argument he gives is objecting to the problem of evil implies that there is a way things ought to be. But if you don't believe that there's a way things ought to be, then the problem of evil is not a problem. It's just
Then you don't need to explain it to anybody, so get off the stage. And
right. Right.
The admission of evil.
Yeah.
Presence thereof.
So next week is our last week. We'll be talking about mini tactics. So hope you'll all be able to join us then. Would anybody like to pray us out? Otherwise, I can. Okay. Heavenly Father, we love you, and we thank you for the light that you shine in a dark world for us. And Father, I just pray that you would open the eyes of our hearts for opportunities this week to share the good news of the gospel with those around us who are looking for the search party. Lord, we know that we're lost. Everyone knows that we're lost. We can feel it deep down in our souls. And Father, I just pray that there would be good soil for us to plant the seeds of your truth. I pray that you be with us this week, and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hey, Sean.